Forget everything you know. Your reality is a thin layer of ice above the abyss of the incomprehensible. Western rationalism, with its stubborn belief in matter and measurability, is just a map describing a small illuminated part of the territory. But there are other maps, more ancient, covered with signs that our science refuses to read. Maps drawn not with ink, but with fear, observation, and blood. We're heading to Japan, but not to the land of anime and neon lights. We are going to Japan through the looking glass to the realm of yokai, creatures whose existence does not deny reality, but expands it to frightening proportions. These are not fairy tales for bullying children. These are reports, protocols, documents that were meticulously filled out by court aristocrats, Buddhist monks, Shinto priests, and village elders over the course of 1,500 years. What if consciousness is not a product of the brain, but a fundamental property of the universe like space or time? What if it can crystallize in forms that have no biological substrate, get attached to a place, to a phenomenon, to a collective trauma? What if extreme emotional states, rage, envy, longing, can not only distort the mind, but also melt the very structure of consciousness, giving rise to something new with its own will and power? Get ready. We are immersed in a systematic account of the unknown, in an archive where myth is the only adequate language for describing reality. Book 1, Kitsune, Perceptual Engineering and the Paradox of Time. Our journey begins with beings whose nature challenges the very concept of evolution. They did not evolve by random mutation. They were accumulating. 1.1. Chrono-alchemy of Fox consciousness. According to the Nihon Seki, 720 AD, and later Buddhist texts such as Konisyaku Monogatari, 12th century, a fox who has lived a century crosses a certain threshold. His consciousness, like wine in a barrel, matures and becomes more complex. It acquires the ability to mimic not on a physical, but on a perceptual level. Kitsune does not transform into a human. It projects a convincing illusion into your mind, forcing your own senses to lie to you. Each subsequent century brings a new tale, a new module of abilities. By the age of 400, they see the future in the germs of the present. Unfortunately, they manipulate space, forcing a familiar path to lead into an unfamiliar thicket. By the age of 900, their consciousness becomes distributed. They can be present in several places at the same time, being tied to a single core. The nine-tailed Kyubi no Kitsune is no longer just a spirit. It is a local deity, a force comparable to natural phenomena. His will can determine the harvest of an entire province or the fate of a ruling clan. It's not just a story. In 943, according to the provincial chronicles of Echigo province, a man named Kyo no Omura married a woman of unearthly beauty named Tamamo. She was the perfect wife, smart, fertile. She gave birth to 3 children. Her house was always full. One night, during a thunderstorm, Omura woke up to a strange noise. Lightning lit up the bedroom, and on the wall he saw not the shadow of his wife, but the shadow of a fox with 9 tails. Terrified, he turned to a wandering Yamabushi the next day. He performed the ceremony and revealed the truth to him. Tamamo was a Kyubi no Kitsune. Her children, though half human, inherited some of her powers. The eldest son, as recorded in the same chronicles, became a famous soothsayer at court. His predictions about droughts and raids by neighbors always came true. What is this but documentary evidence of the hybridization of human and non-human consciousness? 1.3. Tamamo no Me, a psycho-historical operation. The story of Tamamo no Me is not just a legend. This is a detailed account of a centuries-old operation to influence the course of history. Chinese, Indian, and Japanese chronicles agree on the description. The nine-tailed fox consistently appeared as beautiful concubines to the emperors of the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties, driving them to madness and the collapse of states. In Japan, under the name Tamamo no Me, she charmed Emperor Toba. She was exposed during a formal ceremony at court when the powerful Onmyoji Abe no Yasuchika forced her to reveal her true form in front of dozens of witnesses. Their statements recorded in the Ote Monogatari match in detail. After death, her consciousness did not dissipate. It condensed into Sasaseki, a killer stone that emitted poisonous fumes that killed all living things around. The stone exists to this day. Modern geologists confirm it is a volcanic rock with a high content of sulfur and arsenic, capable of releasing toxic gases under certain conditions. A coincidence? Or proof that consciousness can use matter as a substrate to continue its existence? 1.4. Kujigitsune and psychophysical weapons. The Edo period, 1603-1868, has left us archives that resemble the reports of parapsychological laboratories. The Yamabushi, mountain hermits, practiced the creation and use of Kujigitsune, tubular foxes. These finger-sized entities were contained in bamboo tubes and used for targeted attacks on the opponent's consciousness. Court records have been preserved where samurai accused each other of using fox wars. The victims' descriptions of symptoms are uniform: progressive paranoia, auditory hallucinations. Victims heard fox barking, loss of orientation, up to complete psychosis. This is not magic in the fairy tale sense. This is a description of a purposeful psychotronic effect, the methodology of which has been empirically discovered and perfected. 1.5. The Shinto Interface, the Cult of Inari. The 30,000 Inari shrines across Japan are not just places of worship. These are interfaces for interacting with fox consciousness. The kitsune statues with keys in their mouths are symbols of their role as guardians of portals between worlds. Offerings of rice, sake, and fried tofu are not a tribute, but a payment for services, crop protection, business success, and information about the future. It is a highly developed management system of superhuman intelligence. She recognizes that some forms of consciousness cannot be fought, but it is possible and necessary to negotiate. Book 2, Tengu, Neuromagical Battlefields and the Architecture of Mountain Consciousness. If kitsune are masters of illusion, then Tengu are engineers of reality. Their possessions are mountain ranges, where geomagnetic anomalies and infrasound generated by the wind in caves create natural fields for training consciousness. 2.1. Daitengu and Kotengu, Hierarchy of Extra-Metabolic Intelligence. The Tengu classification system demonstrates an understanding of the complex social structure of the non-human mind. Daitengu, Great Tengu, such as Suzaku Bo from Mount Kurama, are personalities. They have personality, knowledge that they are willing to impart, and a complex value system based on honor and military prowess. Kotengu, Small Tengu, are closer to natural spirits, forces, rather than personalities. They are soldiers and servants. This dichotomy suggests that the Japanese tradition has recognized both individualized and collective forms of non-human consciousness. 2.2. The Abduction Phenomenon, an accelerated learning program. Stories of Tengu abductions are not just tales of missing children. These are reports on targeted knowledge transfer. In 1159, the young Minamoto no Yoshitsune, hiding from the enemies of his clan, spent several years on Mount Kurama. The chronicles of Kikeki claim that he was taught by Suzaku Bo himself. What did he study? Not just fencing. He studied tactics that surpassed everything known at the time. The principles of psychological warfare, the use of terrain, and the management of small forces against a superior enemy. His subsequent victories, such as the Battle of Kawanakajima, seem like a miracle from a tactical point of view. Are they explicable only by the genius of one person? Or was he given access to the knowledge accumulated by superhuman intelligence over the millennia? 2.3. The Genesis of Pride. Psychological Transmutation. According to the collection of ancient stories, Kojidan, 12th century, the souls of people consumed by pride can be reborn into Tengu after death. Their inflated ego literally rebuilds the structure of their post-mortem consciousness, endowing it with power but tying it to a specific form, the form of Tengu. This is a profound psychological insight. Extreme narcissism and self-conceit are not just character traits. It is a state of consciousness that can become so intense that it experiences biological death and crystallizes into a new, autonomous entity. Tengu is literally the embodiment of pride. 2.4. Manipulation of atmospheric processes. The Tengu's ability to summon winds and storms, recorded in countless chronicles, may have a physiological basis. Modern research confirms that infrasound, below 20 hertz, generated by strong winds in the mountains, can cause people to feel anxious, panic, a sense of presence, and even visual hallucinations. The Tengu, like the spirits of the mountains, may have learned to consciously generate or direct these infrasound vibrations, using them as weapons to influence the human psyche. Book 3, Kappa, Hydropolitics and Contractual Ontogenesis. Kappa is the quintessence of a pragmatic approach to the supernatural. They don't fight them. Negotiations are underway with them. 3.1. The Anatomy of Vulnerability. The bowl itself. The whole mythology of the Kappa revolves around the Sara, a depression on the top of the head filled with water. This water is the source of their strength and life. To spill it is to disarm the mouth guard. This built-in vulnerability is a key element for establishing diplomatic relations. A creature with such a weakness may be forced to comply with a contract. 3.2. Treaties and Protocols. Agricultural Symbiosis. In the Kyushu region, in Saga Prefecture, Edo period documents describing formal agreements, kyoku, between villages and local Kappa populations have been preserved. These contracts stipulated boundaries, which parts of the river belong to Kappa, which are used by people for fishing. The Kappa's duties are to help with irrigation. They supposedly clean the canals, flood warnings, and the return of drowned bodies. People's duties? Regular offerings, usually cucumbers, which the Kappa prefer to any other food, refusal to fish in forbidden areas. Violation of the contract by people led to immediate consequences. Breakdown of irrigation systems, drowning of livestock, disappearance of children. Compliance with the contract guaranteed abundant harvests and no accidents on the water. 3.3. Medical exchange. The legends of Kappa, who impart knowledge about chiropractic and wound treatment to people, have historical confirmation. In the Principality of Mito, there was a family of doctors who, according to family chronicles, received their unique skills in correcting dislocations and fractures from Kappa, who saved one of their ancestors from drowning. Techniques of this kind were significantly ahead of their era. Book 4. They are psychopathology as a demonic catalyst. They are the embodiment of the idea that the human mind can, after reaching a certain level of moral decay, become something big and terrifying. 4.1. The clinical picture of transformation. Buddhist texts such as Oje Ye Xiu, collection of the most important things about rebirth in the Pure Land, 10th century, describe the process of transformation in them with almost clinical accuracy. This is not an instant transformation after death. This is a gradual rebirth that sometimes lasts for decades, during which the soul, burdened with sins, gomi, literally changes its shape in the afterlife, growing horns and overgrown with skin the color of red-hot iron or rotting leaves. 4.2. The Legend of Kiyohime, a case study of obsessive love. The story of Kiyohime, the daughter of the guardian of the Dojoji temple, is a detailed description of how unrequited passion melts consciousness into a demonic form. In love with a young monk who rejected her, she pursued him in a fit of rage, and her anger was so overwhelming that she turned into Oni, a giant fire-breathing snake demon. Her physical form became a direct reflection of the inner fire that consumed her. 4.3. They are like a social catharsis machine. The Setsubun Festival is not just folklore. This is a massive psychotherapeutic practice. Throwing out the beans, shouting, "They are wa soto, fuku wa uchi," the demons are out, happiness is at home, is a ritualized exorcism of inner demons, anger, envy, greed. Putting on masks allows them to personify these dark sides and symbolically banish them from the collective space. Book 5, Bakaneko and Nekomata, Chronobiology and Deep Intelligence Cats. In the Japanese tradition are creatures whose consciousness evolves over time, rather than solidifying in one form. 5.1. Physiological markers of transformation. The legend that a cat's tail bifurcates with age, giving rise to Nekomata, is not just fiction. Long-tailed cats in medieval Japan often suffered from a condition similar to hypertrichosis, when the tail grew so thickly with hair that it visually appeared to be forked. This physiological anomaly became a marker by which potentially dangerous old cats were identified, whose consciousness, as it was believed, had already crossed the threshold. 5.2. The phenomenon of Nekomat and the theory of senile consciousness. The Nekomat's ability to walk on its hind legs and manipulate objects with its front paws is a symbolic expression of the idea that the consciousness of a cat that has lived too long becomes humanized in its malignity. It takes on the worst traits of people: vindictiveness, treachery, thirst for power. The legends of Nekomata dancing in the night and causing ghostly lights can be interpreted as observing the strange behavior of old, possibly sick cats, whose actions, due to superstitious fear, were endowed with supernatural meaning. Book 6, Tsuchigumo and Jikoryu-gumo, a web of history and underground civilizations. Behind the facade of Japan's official history lies an ancient, shadowy war. 6.1. Tsuchigumo, prehistoric substrate. In Nihon Seki and Kojiki, Tsuchigumo, earth spiders, are depicted not as arachnids, but as the indigenous non-human population of Japan tribes who lived in earthen cave dwellings and opposed the ancestors of modern Japanese. Their victory and destruction by Emperor Jimmu and his warlord Prince Yamato Takeru is perhaps an allegorical description of the real conquest of the islands and the assimilation of indigenous peoples. Their demonization in the chronicles is a standard technique to justify land grabbing. 6.2. Jikoryu Gumo, the Yukai conspiracy theory. The legend of Jikoryu Gumo, the giant spider that the famous swordsman Minamoto no Yorimitsu fought, has its roots in deep layers of folklore. According to some variations, this spider was not just a monster, but the leader or deity of an entire underground Tsuchigumo civilization preserved in deep caves. This story suggests the existence of a parallel hidden world whose representatives only rarely come to the surface. Book 7, Yurei and Onrei, the quantum mechanics of resentment. The Japanese understanding of ghosts, Yurei, and revenge, Onrei, is in fact a pre-scientific formulation of principles reminiscent of quantum physics. 7.1. Anatomy of the Yurei, violation of the thermodynamics of consciousness. The traditional appearance of Yurei in a white funeral kimono with flowing black hair and without legs is not an accident. It is a symbolic representation of consciousness stuck between worlds. Having no legs means being unable to move forward to the next rebirth. Long black hair symbolizes entanglement in earthly passions. They violate the spiritual thermodynamics. The energy of their consciousness did not transform and did not move into a new state, but was trapped, creating a stable but pathological form of existence. 7.2. Onrei, non-locality and causality. The Onra phenomenon is perhaps the most shocking manifestation of the power of consciousness. Resentment, rage, or injustice experienced at the moment of death creates such a powerful charge that it continues to exist after the disintegration of the physical body and can affect the physical world. The story of Onrei Sugawara no Mishizane, a scientist who was unjustly exiled, whose vengeful soul caused lightning and tornadoes in the capital until he was deified, is a historical fact documented in the court chronicles. His mind, charged with resentment, has influenced the weather and political events for decades. This can be considered as a form of non-local causation, when a mental event, resentment, causes physical consequences at a distance and after a long time. Book 8, Modern Yukai, Psychotronic Ghosts of the Information Age. The Yukai archetypes have not disappeared. They migrated to new ecosystems, the urban environment, and the digital space. 8.1. Urban Legends as a Psychological Immunity. Kasane Obake, Ghost Hint. A girl who constantly asks, "Am I beautiful?" and then rips off her mask, exposing her ugly face. This is the purest embodiment of social anxiety, fear of evaluation and falsehood in the era of social media. Jinmenken, human face. A dog with a human face roaming the streets at night. This is the fear of blurring the boundaries between human and animal, of genetic experiments, of the fact that our eye can be distorted beyond recognition. 8.2. Digital yokai cursed videos, the modern equivalent of cursed scrolls or mirrors. A video after watching which misfortunes begin to happen to people. The mechanism of distribution via the internet makes them thousands of times more widespread than their predecessors. Akaname, mudlick. In ancient times, it was a creature licking mud in abandoned baths. Today, it can be metaphorically seen in hackers leaking through dirty, unsecured ports and computer networks, licking confidential data. 8.3. The hikikomori phenomenon. Yukai, of voluntary isolation. Hundreds of thousands of young Japanese who voluntarily imprison themselves in rooms for years are a potential breeding ground for new forms of yukai. Extreme social isolation, immersion in virtual worlds, and suppressed psychic energy can within this paradigm crystallize into autonomous entities, room dwellers, who feed off their host's loneliness and protect his status quo. We have gone through 10 volumes of testimonies. What have we found? We have discovered not primitive superstitions, but a complex phenomenology of consciousness that has developed over the centuries. Japanese civilization did not create religions in the Western sense, but protocols for interacting with forms of mind that do not fit into the materialistic picture of the world. Kitsune tells us about the plasticity of perception and that reality is an arrangement. Tengu teaches that knowledge can come from outside the human tradition, and extreme emotions are material in their impact. Kappa demonstrates that it is possible and necessary to negotiate with non-human intelligence. They are a living warning of what the human soul can turn into. Uri and Henri show that consciousness obeys the laws of conservation of energy and can influence reality even after biological death. Western science, approaching the question of consciousness, looks for it inside the skull. For thousands of years, the Japanese tradition has studied it outside the skull, in the landscape, in the atmosphere, in collective memory, in patterns of behavior that are too complex to be just fiction. Perhaps yokai are not creatures. These are interfaces, the ways in which the human psyche encodes and interacts with real but intangible aspects of consciousness itself, distributed, extra-biological, capable of crystallization and possessing its own will. The door is open. The archive awaits future researchers who are ready to put aside prejudice and look at the evidence of thousands of years not as fairy tales, but as data. Data about the biggest mystery, the mystery of ourselves and the reality that our consciousness constantly creates and participates in. And remember, the fox spirits are still watching. They watch those who kept these chronicles. They are watching you as you read these lines. The question is not whether they exist. The question is, are you ready to admit that your map of reality is incomplete, and that there may be something lurking in the shadow cast by your own mind that looks back